Welcome everyone. Today we'll be taking a regular Excalibur and making him viable for Steel Path. I know that there will be changes to the pseudo Exalteds soon, so I made a build that doesn't really focus on that, or even the Exalted Blade for that matter, all while retaining Excalibur's usual abilities. Without further ado, this is what I call the poster boy build, because let's be real, Excal is the poster boy of Warframe. Essentially, this build focuses on maximum shield and shield recovery, and I know what you're thinking. Why do a shield build when toxin damage attacks health directly? While that's true, there are a few ways to deal with this pitfall, but I'm getting ahead of myself. First, we'll cover Excalibur's abilities. His passive increases damage and attack speed with swords, which will be a nice thing to have for this build, but it's not exactly the best passive ever. His first ability, Slash Dash, is a pseudo-exalted ability that allows him to quickly summon the Exalted Blade to dash to and through enemies. This is a great ability, not just for those reasons though. While using Slash Dash, you become invulnerable, which can help if you are fighting an enemy that is dealing toxin damage. It also is really useful for mobility, especially if you have the energy for it, and it does inflict slash, so that's pretty nice. As for the augments, we have Surging Dash and Purging Slash. We won't be using these for the build because a lot of the mod slots are taking up for shield mods. The second ability, Radial Blind, is pretty self-explanatory. It just blinds enemies. It's pretty useful as a CC and survivability ability, but we won't be relying on it much, to be honest. The augments are Radiant Finish and Signal Flare. The third ability is one of the most important parts of this build. It's basically an AoE ability that inflicts slash, but that part is not as important. What is the augment Furious Javelin. This augment will allow us to increase our damage by insane amounts. The mod itself states that it only increases melee damage by 15% per enemy hit, but this actually scales with ability strength. And now for Exalted Blade. Essentially, you summon a powerful blade, and with your slide attacks, it's like a mini version of the second ability. There's plenty of builds that really utilize the Exalted Blade to an insane degree, but for this build, we'll be using a different melee weapon, so it's not too important. However, I feel like I have to mention that the augment for it, Chromatic Blade, is truly incredible with the amount of status chance that it offers. Here's what I have on my Exalted Blade for those curious. Now, since we're not using the Exalted Blade, what are we using? I went for the Skana Incarnon. Unfortunately, I'm not one of the lucky ones who has Skana Prime, but the Prisma Skana still works wonders. Before I get into the mod setup that I'm using, Wartime Nerve for Evolution 2, Resolute Force for Evolution 3, and Survivor's Edge for Evolution 4. The most flexible out of all of these is Resolute Force. I run primary and secondary dexterity along with Resolute Force, but you really don't have to, especially with the dexterity arcanes. Now here's my mod setup. I'm sure you'll notice the red stats right away. That's just because of Excalibur's passive, so it's indicating the 10% speed and damage buff that you'll have with using the weapon. We're running Melee Influence to spread electricity, but more importantly, slash. Blood Rush to build crit chance, Weeping Wounds to build status chance, Berserker Fury for speed, Voltaic Strike for electricity and status, Galvanized Steel, more crit chance and crit damage, Primed Reach for the range, Melee Elementalist for that nice status damage bonus, and of course Organ Shatter for critical damage. You can replace Berserker Fury for another speed mod or anything you want if you're comfortable with the attack speed as it is. Voltaic Strike can be replaced for a Riven that gives electricity. You'll probably want some crit damage, maybe some status chance on there too. Or if you prefer a mod that gives electricity, that should be fine too. If you don't have Primed Reach, you can use the normal version of Reach or Spring-Loaded Blade if you have it. Or if you're using Orokin Reach on the 3rd evolution for the Skana Incarnon and feel like that's enough, you could have something else there. Something like Killing Blow, Condition Overload, or a Seismic Wave if you like slam attacks. You could also replace Melee Elementalist with Galvanized Elementalist, but with all the status building we have and the extra status chance boost from Voltaic Strike, it's not super necessary to use the Galvanized version, and you get a little extra status damage from Melee Elementalist. Organ Shatter. You can replace this with Amalgam Organ Shatter if you really want to, but when we're doing heavy attacks, it's only really when Tennokai is ready. And since we're using Discipline's Merit, we have a lot of uptime on Tennokai. As for the stance, I just went with Crimson Dervish, but the stance is really up to personal preference. Now that we've got that covered, it's time to show you the poster boy build. We got Arcane Aegis, which we'll be heavily relying upon to keep our shields up. And Arcane Fury for the extra melee damage. And notice this says that it just procs on critical hits. So it doesn't even have to be a melee critical hit specifically. This pretty much means we'll have 100% uptime for Arcane Fury, which is great. For our aura slot, I went with Brief Respite. You won't have to be shield gating too often, really, but there are moments when it takes a sec for Arcane Aegis to proc. In those scenarios, you just gotta cast Excal's 1 for the invulnerability and a bit of shield restore. That being said, if you want to use Steel Charge or something, or Growing Power, go for it. For the Exilis slot, I went for Prime Sure-Footed. I know it's a bit of a meme, but I really don't like being knocked down, and Excal doesn't really have anything to stop that, apart from maybe resisting knockdown during his 1. Adaptation to help our shields go farther and give Arcane Aegis a bit of a better opportunity to proc in doing so. Against enemies that deal toxin damage, this can be replaced for Rolling Guard, or you could do what I do, slash dash away from the toxin enemy and use a primary or secondary to wipe them out. Primed Flow to build energy and outweigh the efficiency deficit we have. Equilibrium to quickly build energy. It's important to note, too, that I am also using Synth Deconstruct and Synth Fiber, but I'll get to that in a moment. Fast Deflection for shield recharge and lowering the delay. Blind Rage for ability strength, mostly needed for his 3. Speaking of his 3, Furious Javelin, this is the augment, we already went over that. Vigilante Vigor for the same reasons as Fast Deflection, but the chance to enhance critical hits for primaries is pretty nice too. Primed Redirection for max shields, this will also increase shield recharge rate and improve the time invulnerable after shields are broken, so that is pretty handy. For companions, I went with Taxon, because he has an ability, Molecular Conversion, helps with shields, Synth Deconstruct and Synth Fiber. I mentioned these earlier. This is for Equilibrium, so we can build energy. Animal Instinct, that's just something I like to have on, not super needed. Regen for Sentinel Recovery Time. There's a primed version of this too that would be better. Vacuum, again, like just a quality of life thing, really. Shield Charger, this is super necessary. You can see why. Max shields and shield regen for Warframe. Manifold Bond, this is nice to reduce the cooldown on abilities. Assault Mode, you got to be able to hit the enemies to proc these two. And of course, Guardian, incredible ability. Boosts owner shield by 100% when it runs out. Great. And for the Sentinel weapon, I'm just using the Verglas. I don't have the Prime version. I haven't really messed with this that much. I don't usually use companions, but basically you just want to make sure that you have at least 3 different statuses. That way you can proc Manifold Bond. So yeah. Primary and secondary can be pretty much whatever you want. I'm using the Burson Prime Incarnon. Here's the evolutions I have on. And here's the build for it. The most notable thing is primary dexterity. I mean, if you're focusing on melee. And here's the build for Icarius Prime. Again, secondary dexterity. Very helpful. The Archon Shards. These are actually kind of, at least in my opinion, I feel like it's mostly preference. I went with 2 Tau Forged Blue Shards for shield capacity. I'll also talk about what else you can do. And 2 Tau Forged, well, this is a normal one, for ability strength, the red shards, and Tau Forged Amber for casting speed. Casting speed is really nice, especially because with his third ability, the animation does kind of take its time on wrapping up. But you can actually, if you have like a ton of shards, you have some purple ones even, you could probably instead change this blue shard to a energy max that would push you over the 500 maximum energy, and with the purple Archon Shards, that basically means that you'll get double the bonus from them. So there's a bunch of other ways you could do this. This is just what I have right now for kind of spur of the moment thing. But yeah. The last thing we'll cover before I head to the Simulacrum is the focus school I'm using, which I'm just using Matter Eye. You can see I don't even have everything unlocked, but it does have some nice bonuses. Okay, now that we're here at the Simulacrum, I will show you the highest level enemies I can have is 155. Of course, I have Steel Path on, and I'll be testing on Corrupted Heavy Gunners. And I'll show you what it's like against those enemies without, having my Incarnon active, without having any buffs on, and not even max energy or anything. And again, you can see it just does a ton of damage. This is without even using my third ability. It's, without Matter Eye, all those things. It still is just incredible as it is. And this time I'll do it again, but with, Blood Rush stacked up, Weeping Wound stacked up, and I'm going to unpause the AI too. So now you can see that even without using some of my major buffs, it still just does incredible damage, cuts them down very quickly. And now I'm going to test on the Scaldra Eximus Dedicants, or I guess Scaldra Dedicant Eximus enemies. Because I don't really see many people showcasing that, and they do have a lot of health and damage attenuation. Now I'm gonna show you what it's like when they're not paused, when the AI of the Scaldra Dedicant Eximus enemies are not paused. But fair warning, the screen's gonna go kind of crazy. It can be kind of overwhelming to see all of those effects. So just wanted to let you know ahead of time. But anyways, here we go. So as you can see, it still went down pretty quickly. The only issue really was just that they were spread out. And again, I didn't even use any abilities. No, not even slash dash for the, invulnerability, not blind, nothing. So it's still just with this alone, it's still very strong. And I could show you what it's like with all of these buffs applied, but honestly, I'd rather you see it for yourself. Obviously, this build, it's just a suggestion, but if you do choose to follow it and, try it out for yourself, maybe try different things, apply the buffs, and you'll see just how crazy powerful it can really get. And that is it for the poster boy build for Excalibur, but I'm actually not done yet. That does conclude the poster boy build, but, I wanted to build on it even further, so I did. As you can see here, I swapped out Arcane Fury for Arcane Energize. That way I can get rid of Equilibrium and put on Precision Intensify. Why put on Precision Intensify? Well, again, it's not an Exalted Blade build, but I put Roar over the 4. Roar, of course, giving a damage bonus, basically acting like a faction mod. A Bane, a Smite, you know, those kind of mods. The rest of the build is more or less the same. It is, of course, you know, more deadly, more efficient than it was. And you can choose any other type of helmet ability that you would like. I just like Roar for the multiplicative damage. You know, having that Roar active, if I was fighting those Dedicants, they wouldn't even get the chance to really spread out much. Especially if I also used Radial Javelin, with the Furious Javelin Augment, of course. You know, it shreds them so quickly. And that was everything that I have to say about this Excalibur build/builds. Anyway, if you made it this far into the video, I really appreciate it. I haven't put this much effort into a video in a long time, and even then it was like a 5-minute video. But anyways, I hope you enjoy the build, and I'll see you in the stars, Tenno.